Hi, everybody. In this video, we're going to talk about intervals of increasing and intervals of decreasing. So, what does that mean? Well, if you look at our parabola, we read a graph from left to right, okay? And if you read this graph, you're going to see that it's decreasing on one side and increasing on the other. But before we can determine what those sides are, let's go ahead and first define those sides. So the axis of symmetry is in the middle, and it actually helps us to define those sides. So let's look at the left side, right? Because it's in the middle. So from the left side at -2, the x coordinate is -2. So on this interval, we want to find out what's happening to the graph when we read it from left to right. So on that interval would be -infinity to -2. What is happening on that interval? Again, it would be from -infinity to -2, the x coordinate of the vertex. We also want to figure out what's happening on the right side of that interval. So the right side of that interval will start at -2, where it picks up at, and go off to positive infinity. So that will be the right side of the interval. Now, let's go ahead and trace the graph the way we read it, okay? We read a graph from left to right like you read a book. So let's start on the left side. If I were to trace my graph on the left-hand side, my graph, my y coordinates, if I'm tracing it, not the ends, but the actual y coordinates as I trace it from left to right, is actually, is it going up? Is it going down? Is decreasing. And it stops decreasing at the vertex, which is -2. At the x equals -2, it stops decreasing. So on the left side, it is decreasing. That interval of decreasing would be from -infinity, and then it stops at -2, which means our vertex is actually the turning point. Our vertex is a turning point. And if we pick up where the vertex is left off, we start to increase again. So on the right side of our graph is increasing from -2 to positive infinity. So the interval of increasing is -2 to positive infinity. And that's how you determine whether a graph is increasing or decreasing. You want to be careful to make sure that you identify your turning point, which is the vertex. The x coordinate of the vertex is the value at which it turns and goes in a different direction. All right. So let's try another example. Once again, we're going to start off with defining what interval we're talking about. So on the left side, our interval, again, is going to be from -infinity to where the vertex is. So our vertex value here is 2. That's where our interval is, from -infinity to +2. That's the right-hand side. Excuse me, the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, it starts at 2 and goes off to positive infinity on the right-hand side. All right, so now that we know what our intervals are, let's go ahead and read our graph. Again, we start on the left-hand side and we read it like we read a book. So if I start at the leftmost point of my graph and I trace it, what are my y values doing as I approach 2? And it looks like they are increasing. So on the interval of -infinity to +2, my graph is increasing. On the interval of -infinity to +2, my graph is increasing. Now let's go to the right side. So when you go to the right side, we pick up where we left off at 2. As you can see, we change direction at that vertex. And now what is the graph doing? Our graph is decreasing. So we draw arrows to show that it's decreasing, like so. It is decreasing. And so on the interval from 2 to positive infinity, our graph is decreasing. On the interval from 2 to infinity, positive infinity, our graph is decreasing. All right. So let's pause right here. Take a look at this example and try your hand at determining whether the graph is increasing or decreasing. Be sure to define what the intervals are on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side before you get started reading your graph from left to right. Pause the video here so you can try the problem yourself. All right, so how did you do? We notice that our interval on the left-hand side goes from negative infinity to -1 because that's the x-coordinate of our vertex. All right, that's where it turns directions. And then the other direction, the interval is going to be from -1 to positive infinity on the right-hand side. So let's start at our leftmost point, and our graph is decreasing on the left-hand side. So on an interval from -1 from negative infinity to -1, our graph is decreasing. But in an interval from -1 to positive infinity, our graph is increasing. All right, good job. All right, I want you to take another look at another example, and I want you to try your hand at this one. Go ahead and pause the video so that you can take your attempt. All right, how did you do? So we see that on the left-hand side, our interval goes from negative infinity to 3, which is the x-coordinate of our vertex. Remember, the turning point of our parabola. And from 3 to positive infinity is the right-hand side, which is the right-hand side of our interval. So on the left-hand side, if we read our graph from left to right, we see that our graph is increasing on the left-hand side. So on the left, the interval for increasing is negative infinity to 3. The interval of decreasing is from 3 to positive infinity. Good job on finding the intervals of increasing and decreasing. Look out for the next video.